Welcome to the Carriker Chronicles, the People Show. We check the pulse of Husker Nation, brought to you by DPS Concrete Construction. Ladies and gentlemen, you're going to notice an individual on the screen with me. All right, I'm going to get to him in just a second. All right, because this is an individual who has a phenomenal YouTube channel, 20,000.8 subscribers at the moment. Go subscribe to his channel, get him to 21,000. All right, we've actually been a sponsor for his YouTube channel, for his show throughout the past year. He does a great job. Okay, lifelong Nebraska fan who's had a ton of unique experiences as well. We're going to get to some of the celebrities he's met, some of the unique experiences he's had. But before I officially bring him on, probably know who it is by now. If you don't, I don't know what to tell you. But if you're excited about what you saw from Nebraska's offense at the spring game, I know it was like a couple of weeks ago, but ladies and gentlemen, it's the most exciting spring game probably in the country. I don't think I'm overhyping that. Okay, the bar is low for spring games. But if you're excited about what you saw from Nebraska's spring game, smash the like button. But I want to bring on Connor Hayden of Crazed. Connor, how you doing, my friend?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me, Adam. I've had you on my show a couple times, so I'm glad I finally get to return the favor and come over here.
Absolutely. And of course, we're going to dive into Nebraska football. And I saw recently, Joel Klatt, his post-spring game top 25 rankings going into the 2024 season. At number 1, he has Ohio State, so a Big Ten team, not Georgia. All right, but at 25, he had Texas A&M. 24, our good buddies from Iowa. 23, Kansas. I actually like Lance Leipold. At number 22, he has Nebraska. Number 21, Arizona. Number 20, Kansas State. A bunch of Big 12 teams surrounding us. But take that A&M, take that Iowa. We're going to brag while we can. But what are your thoughts on Joel Klatt having Nebraska number 22 right now in his top 25 poll? What's Nebraska have to do to finish ranked this fall?
You know, the first thing I noticed was Nebraska was ranked ahead of Kansas, who I have so much respect for. You talk about Lance Leipold. He's one of the best coaches, one of the best up-and-coming coaches in the country, and he's already proven it. They've gone out and done really well in the Big 12. They won a bowl game. And now Nebraska, to get that respect ahead of Kansas, says a lot about what, obviously, Klatt and the national media think Nebraska can be. I think the one point he tried to make in that video where he talked about this is that Nebraska was so close last year. We talked about chasing 3, and Matt Rule's whole goal is to close that gap because they were 4 games away from being a 9-win team. And a lot of people are going to say, well, Connor, you're drinking too much Kool-Aid. This is classic you, overhyping the team once again. But the reality is I'm not the only one who's thinking it. There are a lot of national media guys who watched Nebraska last year, saw how good the defense was, saw the progression with Matt Rule, and everything that we believed about him seemed to be true because he was able to take that team, find their weaknesses, basically evolved them over the entire course of the season, although they had that one weakness at quarterback. And then this year going into the season, he was able to fill those needs at quarterback, obviously, with a 5-star guy. And now Nebraska's looking like they're in position to make that step forward that Matt Rule always does in year 2. So I respect Joel Klatt a lot. I love to see him give Nebraska respect because all of us have our narrative about Nebraska and what we feel they can be. But to see other people who are not just biased fans like we are, go out there and make those bold predictions and calls feels really good because it edifies what we actually believe. Nebraska getting to that 8-9 win mark and becoming a top 25 team, I think it's really 2 things. Number 1, they need to start off and win the games they're expected to win. Nebraska should start 6-1, 7-0, which obviously sounds ridiculous, but go look at that schedule and it is not daunting. They have a lot of good home matchups, and then when they get to Ohio State, they've got Ohio State, UCLA, USC, Wisconsin, Iowa on that back end. They've got to pull at least one upset. They might be a dog, or they're probably going to be a dog on the road at USC. Win that game or beat Wisconsin. I think that one will be at home, or beat Iowa at the end there, and that could be enough to get them to the top 25 mark, or at least the range, so they can finish with a bowl win and then a top 25 final ranking.
I agree with a lot of that. Win the games you're supposed to, pull off an upset, learn how to win the close games. A lot of that makes an awful lot of success. Now, it's interesting because one of the questions I have coming up here is, are people drinking the off-season Kool-Aid just a little bit too much? But here's one thing I haven't heard a lot of people talk about. Matt Rule makes considerable jumps year after year. He hasn't stayed places long. I know he wants to stay at Nebraska. I know that for a fact. Okay. Now, his progression from year to year is 11.5% improvement. A typical good head coach makes a 5% improvement. He is by far the largest improvement from year 1 to year 2 as he progresses as a head coach in a program of any other coach in the country. So take that with a grain of salt if you'd like. I'll take it with a grain of pepper and ask the next question. What's the bottom of the barrel that you would consider to be a successful season for Nebraska next year? And I'm just asking wins and losses. I don't really care about anything else at this point.
Yeah, bottom line is they got to win 7 games. Last year, I think the bottom of the barrel was 6. Them getting to 5 made me feel like, there were some missed opportunities. And I think that the entire team could agree with that. This year, 7 seems like the baseline. They've got a really favorable schedule. And some people will say, oh, well, last year was an easier schedule. No, go look at that thing. It is not that bad. They have the talent on defense. They've got 10 returning starters. Right now, they're talking to one of the top safeties. I think he is the top safety in the portal. Honorable All Big Ten last year, Jaden Mangum. They have potential pieces coming in to add to an already stellar defense. And then you look at the offense, which is obviously going to be improved based on what we saw in the spring game. 7 has got to be the baseline.
All right, so we haven't been to a bowl game since 2016. We're the only Power 5 program that unfortunately can say that. 6-6 is not the bottom of the barrel for you. 7-5 is.
Absolutely. That's got to be the expectation. We have to have expectations when you're talking about a staff who's as good as they are. It's their last year probably with their stellar DC, Tony White, and you've got to make the most of the situation.
All right, realistic, and then we'll get into what Dylan's ceiling is, but what are realistic expectations for Dylan Raiola heading into 2024?
We can keep it basic, and it goes back to what we talked about with Joel Klatt saying Nebraska was so close last year. They didn't need a superstar quarterback. They needed a guy who could be a game manager, and they needed a guy who wouldn't turn it over and over and over. This year, Dylan knows and understands the assignment. It's protect the football. We saw the way he protected it in the spring game, and we know that that's the point of emphasis in his coaching. So if his whole program is, I'm going to protect the ball, I'm not going to make mistakes, and he just has a decent season, Nebraska can be successful. Ask your question again, Adam. Was it that you want to know what his ceiling is?
So my next question, and we'll kind of combine what I just asked and this upcoming question into one, then you take it, okay? So Dylan's ceiling potentially, in my opinion, you look at the Big Ten Conference, because you put out a show about a month or two ago, you had him I think number 9, okay, in the Big Ten Conference as a quarterback, a lot of guesstimation in there because he's a true freshman. But there's 2 proven elite quarterbacks, Dylan Gabriel, okay, and Will Howard. Are there balloons popping up on the screen right now? Where the heck did those come from?
You're using your FaceTime camera. On the FaceTime camera, they got to,
Okay, all right. Hey, we're having fun. Ladies and gentlemen, I've never brought a guest on where you could see him and me talking at the same time, so we're having fun today. And thank you, because honestly, we didn't know how to do it. Thank you, Carter, for helping us out with that. But Dylan Gabriel and Will Howard, those are kind of the 2 proven elite quarterbacks in the Big Ten. 3 potentially elite quarterbacks in the Big Ten. Okay, I look at Will Rogers of Washington, potentially. Drew Aller, who looked awful in his spring game, but the potential to be great is there. Okay, Noah Moss out at USC. Dylan has the potential to be in that conversation. But what does Nebraska need from him to be successful?
So,
okay, what does he need to do?
Yeah, so the number 1 point is to protect the ball, right? Like I said. But if Dylan can just distribute it to the receivers who we've already seen can be effective. Isaiah Nair looked really good on short crossing routes. He can make plays upfield. He's kind of a balanced receiver. We didn't get to see much of Jamal Banks, but what we've seen from him at Wake Forest, he's a possession guy who can get downfield. He's a big body. And then obviously Jalen Lloyd, who already showed us that he can beat guys over the top. If he can just distribute the ball to receivers like that, if Nebraska can move it downfield, not turn it over, they're going to be in position to score points. Getting to that 20-point mark shouldn't be that difficult. And as we saw last year, this defense can hold teams to 17 with ease. So that's what it takes for the offense. And Dylan isn't going to have to do too much. Just protect the ball and distribute it properly.
I agree with you completely. I mean, can we just execute a handoff? Can we execute putting a guy in motion and not snap the ball into him? Okay. And we didn't have a single quarterback with more touchdown passes than interceptions last year. All right. And I'm not trying to bury anybody. These are facts. They don't care about anybody's feelings, including mine, as I share these things. Our completion percentage as a quarterback unit was 52%. The national average completion percentage is 64%. Okay. So just keep some of those things in mind. We don't have to set the world on fire. Just complete 60% of our passes, have more touchdown passes and interceptions, execute the little things. Basically what you said, you're 100% correct. The Nebraska running back room has not been talked about a ton. I also do love the big-bodied wide receivers we have, 6'3", 6'4", 6'6" tight ends. You got Ethan Carter coming in. I'm sorry, he's another big target, true freshman. Borkashire, don't forget about him. Just big bodies to throw the ball to. Easier to protect the ball is my point. All right, the Nebraska running back room's not been talked about a ton. And in fairness, Ramirez beat up, Gabe's been beat up. Okay, so Emmett Johnson and Dante Dowdell kind of took the spring game, got the majority of the carries anyways. Okay, don't forget about Quentin Ives, who Matt Rule has talked about from time to time. But if you were to project the starter, and we don't have enough information to do this right now, so we're just going to have fun. Who's your starting running back going into game 1 versus UTEP, and then your 2 and 3 on the depth chart as well?
Yeah, right now, the number one I'd have to say is Emmett Johnson, just based on the spring game. He fought hard. You know, that guy really wants it. He came out of Minnesota, and he was one of the top backs, I think, in his class, not for the entire country, but from the state of Minnesota and for what Nebraska could get. So let's say he comes in this year. He now has a role carved out. He knows he's going to be the starter. He's put on some weight. He's trying to be the more balanced back and not just be a fast, small guy running around out there. He knows he can be a Big Ten workhorse. Nebraska's offense is going to be fit for his skill set because they're going to try and distribute it out of the backfield. Behind him, I would put Dante Dowdell. We saw him come in. He's more of the bruiser back that Nebraska really wanted to use last year, where the defense down since they weren't passing it as much. Behind him right now, I just have to assume would be Gabe Ervin. I don't know how that's going to pan out since he's coming back off injury. If I had to say who I thought was going to get the more favorable opportunity, it would be Gabe Ervin, because I think the staff really likes him. But coming off of injury and not really knowing what's going on with him, I'll put him behind Dowdell for now.
I can't argue with any of those. Okay. And it's crazy because Ramir has a lot of ability as well. There's other backs in that room with ability. It's a loaded room. Just got to get it healthy. All right, real quick, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to talk about the defense. Should Nebraska fans be concerned in the kicking game? Who are some of the celebrities that Connor's had a chance to meet? But before we do that, as you know, this show is brought to you by DPS Concrete Construction. Okay, you can check them out at dpsconstruction.net. If this is what you do for a line of work, Jason Armstrong's a phenomenal owner. I just did an appearance with him. Every single one of the profits that we brought in was donated to the victims of the horrific tornadoes. Okay, and he did a great job managing that, setting that up, getting that rolling. Check them out at dpsconstruction.net. Also, Bonzel Pools. They're putting in my family's pool. Jeff Bonzel just seems like a good dude. And legit, he's like, Adam, I just wanted to put in a great pool, do a great job for your family. And those are the words he told me when I was talking to all the pool guys around Lincoln, who all were very appealing, but he was the most appealing. Check them out at bonzelpool.com. Pools, saunas, hot tubs. All right, check them out at 3201 Pioneers Boulevard in Lincoln, Nebraska, or you can call them at 402-488-0148. All right, Connor, 10 returning starters on a top 15 defense. A future head coach. And I don't even want to talk about the fact that he's not going to be here as long as we'd like. We're not going to go there. A future head coach is our defensive coordinator. A great young staff on defense. Okay, then you talk about Bly Hill's probably going to be able to play this season. We didn't know, okay, after the spring game. It doesn't look as serious as we feared, which is great. Tommy Hill's the other corner. We need a linebacker to step up. Is it the freshman Vincent Shavers? Is it Stephon Diggs? Does he get in a little bit better shape? I know he's working. But what are your expectations? Because I know Tony White wants this to be the number one defensive unit in the country. You look at those first 7 games, there's 0 proven good offenses that we're going to face. That includes you, Colorado. You ain't proven. Not yet. Talent's there. What are your realistic, not even realistic, what are your expectations for the Blackshirts, Connor?
Well, you talked about Stephon Thompson, you talked about Vincent Shavers. Those are 2 really good linebackers, as we've heard about so far in the spring. I think Stephon had some growing pains, but as we've seen at Syracuse before, he fits this defense perfectly, and I think he's going to get it together. So I don't think this defense really takes a step back. I think everybody on the line is going to take a step forward. Tommy Hill, now understanding his role after having such a good back half of that season last year, I think he's going to step in and become an NFL-level corner. The defensive backs just as a whole are going to be better. You've got Malcolm Hartzog playing a position that he wants to play at safety where he fits perfectly. Marquise Buford back off injury. Deshaun Singleton not out there yet, but he'll be in position. So I think the expectation for the defense is to match the production from last year and have a few of those guys increase their numbers. You see the 2 true freshmen, Prince Will Mamielen and Cam Lenhart, both now coming in to understanding what their assignments are and not feeling like they're true freshmen and have to learn the position. They know what to expect in the Big Ten, and they know how to defend it. So I think this defense is going to take a step forward. I don't want to put too high of expectations because last year was such an incredible season, and it was led by 3 linebackers who obviously have been in the program for a long time. Now you only get one of those back to kind of lead that core with John Bullock. But I think that a lot of these guys on defense are refreshed. They're excited. They're coming in healthy, and they've had a lot of time to prepare. So I'm looking for Ty Robinson, Nash Hutmacher, and some of those big dudes to make big jumps.
All right. we have some athletes this year that can return the ball on special teams. I look forward to returns this year on special teams, although they've tried to eliminate kickoff returns out of the game. Topic for another day. Brian Buschini, former FCS punter of the year, big fan, love this guy as a person, good player, back for his third year with Nebraska. Tristan Alvano, talents through the roof. Okay, back again with the Huskers, had a rough spring game. Should Nebraska fans have genuine concerns about the kicking game at all?
You know, I think there is reason to be concerned. Tristan Alvano had some pains last year early on. He got it together as the season went, and I felt like, you know, maybe that was what was going to be the turning point. That would calm his nerves, and he would see that he's meant for the moment. But then the spring game came around. He missed those first two, and they were ugly misses. They weren't too long of field goals, and it just gave you that feeling of what you had last year where, well, is he too young? Does he not have that mental makeup? Is he ready to go yet? We won't know the answer until he gets into a game because, you know, spring game obviously can't tell you everything you need to know. There's still a lot more time to get himself right. But that is something I'm worried about. Brian Buschini, I wouldn't say I'm too worried about. You know, he had his peak when he first got to Nebraska, and then ever since he hasn't been as consistent. But I still think he's at worst serviceable, and I think Nebraska's going to be just fine from a punting standpoint. In the return game, obviously a lot to be determined. If Ja'Cory Barney is the main returner, is it going to be Tommy Hill, who's obviously had success there? I'm not sure, but I feel good about their return game either way. You look back, and in the first game of the season, Ramir Johnson had, I think, a 50-yard return on Minnesota. They looked great, so I think that return game is going to come together. It is more so an emphasis on the field goal unit because this team is going to be in a lot of close games, and we need them to make those field goals.
I'm with you. Don't forget about, it's going to come down to field goals, but don't forget about Ramir as a potential return man as well. All right. Last two questions I got for you. Now, you've had the opportunity to have a bunch of unique experience, be in big stadiums, see a lot of cool events, meet a lot of celebrities. Now, you mentioned to me you may have helped Floyd Mayweather into I don't know the full story, a strip club a time or two. Also, Jerry Rice left you a voicemail at halftime of one of your football games your sophomore year of high school while he was golfing with your dad, I might add. So, is there a story you'd like to share with the fine folks at home that you'd be comfortable sharing?
Yeah, okay, so I got a great story that just came into my head. I went to the Oklahoma game back in 2021. My dad and I went out there because my dad lives in Oklahoma, about an hour and a half away from Norman. So he said, you know, we're going to go to this game. We're going to sit in the best seats. You know, the Nebraska-Oklahoma rivalry means so much. I really want to enjoy that with you. So we went out there. We went with a friend, and we sat on the 50-yard line, fifth row, amazing seats, and it was a great game. You know, Adrian Martinez did his thing. Nebraska couldn't win at the end, but all in all, it was a great experience and my first time in Norman. After the game, my dad said, hey, we're going to go over to my friend Barry's house. I was like, Barry? Who's Barry? He's like, oh, Barry's my friend. I met him on a cruise ship last year. He's super cool. We got to go see him. I'm like, okay. So we start walking over to this guy Barry's house, and it's kind of in the center of Norman. It's like a 10-minute walk from the stadium. We walk in. His friend Barry was Barry Switzer. So 10 minutes after that, I'm sitting on the couch watching the USC-Washington State game with Barry Switzer and a couple other former Oklahoma players, big names. I obviously didn't know them until I met them that day, and I can't remember them by now. But we ended up going to Barry's office. He had all of his Super Bowl memorabilia, national championship memorabilia. I got my picture with him, made a great video out of it. It was an awesome experience. And yeah, I've had some really cool opportunities to meet big time coaches and players and travel around the world. I obviously live in LA, so I've been in the entertainment industry, and yeah, some of these connections really give you a perspective onto what's happened before you and what's going on in the world around you. It's really cool to be able to enjoy that and experience it.
He's also had the chance to meet Urban Meyer. I believe you mentioned Tim Tebow before we started rolling here today as well. All right, last question for you. You had a bout with testicular cancer, or as you phrased it, ball cancer to me before the show. Okay, for anyone who's dealing with cancer, or maybe just a very difficult, maybe a life-threatening situation potentially in their life, whatever the case may be, somebody else who's dealing with cancer or even trying to rebound from these tornadoes, just a very difficult situation in their life, you know, what advice would you give those people as they're trying to make their way through this situation?
You know, I think a lot of it's about perspective. I talked about that cancer thing because I know you were going through a health issue the same time I was. I remember you posting about your heart. And at that time, you know, I was 28 years old. I was really stressed out. I had corn craze going on. I was trying to make sure that I capitalized on my moment, was making as much content as possible. And I got hit with this really hard news that I didn't know much about. And obviously hindsight's 2020. It wasn't as big of a deal as I thought it was at first when the doctors talked to me about it, because I just got that ball removed and then went through chemo a little bit and we were good to go and back up and running after. But I think a lot of it's about perspective and understanding that, there are people who have really tough things going on in life, and although you might be going through something that's really hard, somebody else has it worse, and if they can get through their situation, you can get through yours too. And if you keep that mindset, it'll give you at least a little bit of positivity along that journey, and hopefully you don't get too down and aren't able to recover from whatever it is that you're going through.
Man, those are powerful words. Priorities and perspective are huge. It makes a big impact. Positive mindset, positive outlook, all that stuff. I've literally felt my mood change on a bad day when I just changed my perspective for that day. All of a sudden, it doesn't seem so dark and gloomy. And I'm not even talking about, ball cancer, things of that nature. So shout out to you. Those are powerful words. Okay. They go beyond and they transcend football. So I want to thank you for joining me today, Connor. We'll continue doing things in the future, I'm sure. But as always, and Connor does this on his show too. Okay. But I want to, you find folks at home, let me know your answers to these questions below: YouTube, Facebook, Twitter. All right, first question I got for you. You can give me a long answer, or you can just simply say yes or no if you'd like. Will Nebraska finish the season ranked? Number 2, are people drinking the off-season Kool-Aid just a little bit too much? And number 3, will Dylan Raiola finish as a top 5 quarterback in the Big Ten? I love that I talk about Kool-Aid, and then will Dylan Raiola finish as a top 5 quarterback in the Big Ten? It's the off-season. We're having fun. Thank you for joining me, Connor. And until next time, Husker Nation, go Big Red. You're killing me, Smalls. And always remember to throw the buzz.